Alright guys, welcome to another Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade video, and today I'm going to do a build guide on how to play Yuta. Now, I have actually been playing Yuta quite a lot recently, either in the tower mode or obviously in the imaginary realm battle as well. So there are, if you guys watch my videos, you guys may have already noticed that certain things I always do when I play Yuta, but I never really explicitly explained why I'm doing it that way. And after watching some game clip of other people playing Yuta, I actually realized there are a few things that may not be common knowledge, and I definitely seeing a lot of people making certain mistakes whenever they play Yuta. So I just want to make a video, a guide video, first of all addressing some of those obvious mistakes that you may be making right now when you're playing Yuta, and then obviously just to make an actual build guide that I will go through of his kit, go through what Recollections should you put on him, and also what kind of team lineup do you actually want to use, etc. as well. Okay, now let's start off with the biggest mistake I've seen people do, which is that I see a lot of people, as soon as they play Yuta, on either the first turn or the second turn, they go straight into their skill 3. And that to me is a massive mistake that you should avoid trying to make. The answer is quite obvious if you actually think about it. But let's first compare Yuta alongside with other DPS, and what you may actually realize is that a lot of the big strong DPS right now, for example, all versions of Gojo or even Nobara, for example, they tend to have one skill which is either buff or debuff skill to make their attacks a lot stronger. And basically, when you do that, you kind of already know, like before you using your ultimate attack, you should use your buff skill or debuff skill to make you hit a lot harder. And the same with Yuta is that it's not obvious that he also actually have a buff available to him because it's not actually explicitly written as one of the skills. However, if you actually take a look at his kit, you then realize when he actually uses his ultimate attack, he is going to be able to apply a buff to himself for 4 turns. And likewise, one of his passive ability is actually that whenever he heals the enemies, heal your own allies when they're less than 60% HP, you're also going to get increased to by a tiny bit, only 10%, but still you're going to get that increase to yourself. And what that actually means together is that Yuta is actually a character who gets a lot stronger as the battle goes on. Because let's face it, in the first 3 or 4 turns, there's no way you're going to be able to use ultimate attack straight away. And likewise, you may not yet be able to activate all 3 times of your passive yet. However, if you actually then move forward a few turns, like for example on turn 5 or turn 6 onwards, it's very likely that Yuta will get a 30% buff from this passive, and then also if he had to use his ultimate attack, he's going to get another 20% buff for 4 turns as well. And basically, if you actually think about it that way, the attacks from Yuta is a lot stronger towards the later part of the battle rather than the starting part. So for the same 30 curse energy, if you just go into the battle and use this straight away in the first 3 or 4 turns, you are not actually going to get the most value out of it. The most value you're going to get is when you have already activated this 3 times, and also after you use your ultimate attack, and that is basically at the point where you are going to get the most amount of damage from your skill 3. And bear in mind, this buff is for 4 turns, so ideally you actually want to use this back to back 4 times or 3 times. I don't actually know whether this is active for the turn of the ultimate gauge, but still you are looking to feasibly looking to save at least like 90 curse energy once you use your ultimate attack. So it's just going to be a very bad idea for you to start off the battle already consuming your curse energy, because remember, to activate this passive, it costs 10 curse energy as well. So basically, when you consider all of that, it just makes absolutely no sense for you to use your skill 3, which first of all won't do as much damage as later on, and second of all is actually going to waste your curse energy. So once you have all of your buff available, you won't actually be able to use it every single turn. So that's basically the biggest mistake I've seen people doing. You should always be conserving your curse energy and only using skill 3 kind of roughly from either turn 5 onwards, or at least once you have your ultimate attack ready to give yourself a bit of an extra buff. Now obviously there are going to be a few different cases. For example, if you just really need to get skill 3, you want to kill off one enemy in order to move to the next phase, then you can. But as a general rule of thumb, you should only be doing this once you have sufficiently buffed yourself either through your ultimate attack or through your passive abilities, etc. So that's basically going to be the biggest thing you can take away from this video today. Now, in terms of his other kit, I will just briefly talk about his whole kit, by the way. So first of all, his skill 2, you don't normally want to use this. Now, I know Yuta in the future is going to get buffed, judging by the JP version. However, as of now, skill 2 is you normally just wouldn't want to use it at all, because first of all, the crit resistance can be helpful, but a lot of time you can just restart the battle to get that. I normally only use this for the crit resistance decrease when, for example, this a very RNG heavy battle and I can't be asked to keep on restarting battle multiple times. Then fine, I might use it just to make my life a bit easier. But vast majority of the time, you can literally just retry the battle to get that crit. So this basically means nothing. And then this instant death, once again, you can ignore it. This I only ever see it being triggered off in the easier content like domain investigation, etc. Any harder content, you can ignore this effect completely. So that's kind of why overall you would just never use skill 2. Not to mention it consumes 20 curse energy as well, when Yuta actually need a lot of his curse energy in the second half of the battle to do your back-to-back skill 3. So basically skill 2, you can ignore it for the most part. Skill 1, you will be using it a lot, especially because you're conserving your curse energy. And the nice thing about this is it's a physical attack, so that actually allows you to stack up pride. So you will be using this a lot. And then obviously we will talk about skill 3. A very strong move. The damage multiplier from his skill 3 is like equivalent to ultimate attack from a different character. So this by itself is one of his strongest hitting move, and that's kind of why you really want to conserve it for the second half of the battle. You will see this being used a lot, and it definitely hurt. It do so much damage, it's crazy. Now, if you think Yuta only go for his ultimate attack as the main damage attacking move, then you're not playing him correctly. You have to realize his skill 3 plays a massive part into his overall damage output, and that's kind of why it's very important for you to conserve curse energy for that. And then obviously we have his ultimate attack, which first of all is able to do an AoE, and then the second half is that you are able to obviously give yourself a buff. You do have to bear in mind the ultimate gauge increase notification for 4 turns. That is actually a long time, so do not expect to be able to spam his AoE ultimate attack back to back or like very quickly. It's just not going to work, and that's kind of why once again overall throughout the entire battle, your skill 3 is actually going to make up a huge amount of damage that Yuta is able to dish out. In terms of passive ability, I already talked about this. This can only be triggered when 60%. It's a very strong ability, mainly for the fact that it's able to actually heal your teammate as well, on top of the fact that it's actually buff, and also it can actually recover your ultimate gauge. So sometimes this is actually a way of making sure you are able to reach your ultimate attack on a certain turn. Is try different methods to actually trigger this as much as possible. And then this other attack, counter attack, this one it's very RNG based, first of all, in whether you actually trigger, and it's not always a nice thing, especially when you're trying to stack up pride twice. What you would tend to find out is that because pride get used whenever you do a curse technique attack, and this is curse technique, this will actually end up eating one stack of your pride buff. So this is not actually always a bad thing, even when you do counter attack. But when it does counter attack, obviously it's not just the fact that you do a bit of damage, you actually interrupt the enemy's attack as well. So it can actually save you in some scenario, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword depending on what recollection you have on, etc. Okay, now let's talk about the actual recollections that you want to put on Yuta. Now I kind of already mentioned quite a few things. So obviously Pride is a very good free-to-play recollection that you can put on Yuta because of the fact that you can actually stack it twice within the 5-turn cooldown. Basically it lasts for 8 turns, however the cooldown 5 turns, and that's kind of why you are able to stack it. And because you will actually be using Yuta skill 1 a lot in the early part of the battle anyway, because you're conserving your curse energy, you will naturally be able to stack up pride without actually eating up any of your stronger attack. Now that's kind of why pride does actually have very good synergy with Yuta. And then the other nice thing, which you won't really see this when you put pride on Gojo, because Gojo have that damage immunity, but Yuta does actually lose his HP pretty quickly. And then what's going to happen is that you're going to get another buff, which is 30% damage out, and this work for 3 times as well. So considering the fact that Yuta actually is suited for battles which are last for quite a while, for all of your skill 3 to take a lot of damage, this actually does have a bit of synergy with Yuta as well. So that's kind of what Pride is actually very good recollection for him. And also obviously on the fact that the active skill is for 2 times as well. So not only is going to work for your ultimate attack, it's also going to work for your really strong buffed up skill 3 afterward. So overall, Pride is like one of the best recollection for Yuta, assuming you don't actually trigger the counter attack by accident and then therefore actually eat up your Pride stack. So that's why it's a very good choice for Yuta. One really bad choice I do have to say, but I see some people play it anyway, is going to be non-standard. Now, well, actually, it's not a bad choice because it is a very strong, and Yuta does have very strong ultimate attack, so it can work. But in comparison to a lot of the other recollection that you can put on Yuta is that, first of all, Yuta, you really want to get a bit of a buff over all of his attack, not just for his ultimate, because if you think about it, is going to get that attacking buff for 4 turns. So you actually kind of want a recollection that is able to buff up your damage for quite a few times in the battle rather than only once. And also, if you add in the fact that when you actually play Yuta, whenever he uses his ultimate attack, he actually get that ultimate gauge notification as well. So he won't actually be able to use his ultimate attack that often. So if you're actually using non-standard, you are basically going into like a one hit nuke, one hit KO kind of scenario where you need to kill off the enemy with your ultimate attack. Otherwise, non-standard is not actually going to be as good as lots of other choices that I can put on instead. So that's kind of why non-standard. I mean, I won't say it's a bad choice, but it's not the best choice for Yuta. Let's just put it that way. And instead, what I actually recommend is that you can actually put some recollections, which can actually give consistent or sustained amount of buff that is going to be available Yuta. So that Yuta, no matter whether it's Yuta's ultimate attack or for his back-to-back skill 3 afterwards, you can always take advantage of the buff on you. And there's a few recollections able to do that. The best one is going to be this one. Basically, this one has a bit of a active effect and lasts for 3 turns. So once again, you're able to use this not only for when you're using your ultimate attack, but also for the buffs for your skill 3s afterward. But also this also have a bit of a passive ability, which is a permanent 20% damage dealt, and they increase with the number of students at Tokyo School, which Yuta himself is a Tokyo School student. So by this, what you're actually going to get is, I don't actually know what's the buff from Yuta. I'm just going to be conservative and say maybe it's like another, I don't know, 2%, let's say. So basically, what you can get is you can get like 22% here for permanently on all of your attack, and then you can get another 30% on yourself for 3 turns. So basically, if you think about your back-to-back skill 3 attacks plus your ultimate attack, for the duration of those 4 attacks, you're going to get a permanent 50% increase to every single one of them, which is actually crazy when you think about it. So that's kind of why this over a long battle is actually going to be a lot more useful than, for example, just buffing up your ultimate attack one time using non-standard, etc. So that's kind of why this is actually a really good recollection on him. The other one, which can also do similar kind of thing, is going to be this one. Now, this one is limited recollection, so not everyone's going to have it. But the nice thing about this one is, first of all, you are going to get a bit of a boost in your curse energy one time for 40%, and that is obviously you'll be using that for your ultimate attack, so that you are going to get a bit of a spike in terms of damage up from your ultimate attack. But even afterwards, once you have done that and you're using your skill 3 back to back, for example 3 times, you are still going to get a permanent 15% curse technique increase. So basically, no matter which attack you're doing, you're always going to be able to buff yourself. The buff is not going to be as high as the first recollection I just showed you, so that's kind of why it's not as good, and also it's limited. So this is probably not the best choice for Yuta, but this one is definitely able to do a lot of benefits for Yuta in comparison to a lot of the other choices you can have. And not to mention also obviously the active effect, 10 curse energy, that's actually useful when you need to use your skill 3. Let's say back to back 3 or 4 times. This is also going to be extremely useful to make sure you have enough curse energy to do all of those skill 3 attacks as well. So this is also a very good recollection in my opinion. So yeah, so that's all of the recollections which I would recommend for Yuta. Like I said, the best one overall is probably going to be this one. But if you want the free-to-play option, Pride is definitely very good, as long as you don't actually trigger the counter attack to eat up his buff stack. Okay, so that's basically going to be my recommendation for recollections on Yuta. Now let's talk about his actual team. Now, one team a lot of people actually play Yuta in, especially when Yuta was first released, is you play it in like a 2 buffers and then 2 DPS, basically playing Blue Gojo and also Yuta together. Now, this team do work, I'll have to say, but it kind of works just because Yuta and Blue Gojo, they're both very strong characters. So you kind of just get that effect of having 2 OP character on your team, and of course it's going to work. And also this is especially good in battles with multiple waves, because both of their ultimate attack is actually AoE. So basically you are able to wipe out an entire wave with your ultimate attack, and you are able to do that in turns, and therefore you are able to clear out the waves very, very quickly. So it certainly does work. However, if you actually think about the main strengths of those two characters, you then realize actually there isn't actually a great synergy between the two of them, because basically Gojo disappeared from the battle from 10-7. Whereas if you then think about Yuta, Yuta really only start peaking his damage from 10-6 onwards once he actually get his ultimate attack ready. Like he normally only start doing stuff, his damage attacked from like 10-6 onwards. And so when you actually mix those two together, knowing the fact that Gojo is going to retreat from the battle from 10-7. You are not actually going to get the best of the both worlds when you actually play them together. Because either you are trying to do the damage early before Gojo leave, or you'll be trying to do the damage later on when Yuta is able to get off his buff, and just doesn't quite synergize with each other. So that's kind of why, even though it does work because they're both two very strong character, this is not normally something I would recommend. And instead, what I do think is going to be better is just the standard Yuta plus 3 support character. And it's normally going to be a combination of 3 characters from the 4 supporters I have on the screen here. Now, I'm going to start off with Yaga and Nanami and just talk about why they're good. It's kind of obvious because basically, like I said, Yuta needs to get buff not just for his one single ultimate. He kind of need that buff for all of his subsequent skill 3 attacks afterwards as well. So you almost want a way to have buff always available on Yuta. And obviously, yes, you are able to do that with the likes of Kaito, but even if you don't have Kaito on the team, knowing the fact that both Yaga and Nanami's buff is able to last for 4 turns, that by itself is already very, very great value to Yuta, because it kind of ensures that no matter whether you are able to sustain off your curse energy, Yuta is going to get some kind of benefit from all of the buff Yaga and Nanami will be doing. It's just going to be a question of how many stacks, but they will definitely be available because it lasts for 4 turns. And that's also kind of the reason why even the Momo is a very good support character. I don't actually recommend playing Momo with Yuta because Momo's ability only lasts for 2 turns, and on top of that, it's only 1 time in 2 turns. So you're not actually able to sustain the same amount of buff throughout all of the attacks that Yuta is able to do. And that's kind of why Nanami and Yagas are going to be much, much better choices to Momo when you actually play them alongside a team with Yuta. And then the next character I'm going to talk about is going to be Kaito. Kaito is extremely, extremely good with Yuta. Obviously, he's a terrific character with any kind of DPS, but when you pair him up with Yuta, he is a lot more helpful than when you pair him up with other DPS character. For example, all versions of Gojos out there right now, they don't actually use curse energy when they attack. And one of the main things with Kaito is his skill 3. So when you actually play Kaito in a team, you are able to increase the curse energy for your whole team. And yes, that would benefit Gojo because, for example, when you pair him up with some buffers, you will be able to get that buff onto your Gojo every single turn. However, that basically saying Kaito is indirectly helping your DPS. The curse energy itself doesn't actually benefit Gojo himself. And similarly for Toji, he doesn't need any curse energy either. And even for the likes of Nobara, even though Nobara consumes curse energy, a lot of time Nobara will be using his skill 1 to stack up the nails, which doesn't cost any curse energy either. So curse energy a lot of times is actually wasted on a lot of DPS characters. However, that's not the case with Yuta. I already mentioned Yuta's skill 3 is one of the hardest hitting normal skills in the game. Well, normal as in like non-ultimate skills in the game. It's like equivalent to an ultimate skill from other characters, and therefore extra curse energy on Yuta doesn't just mean more buff from your support character, it actually means more times you're able to use your own skill 3 as well. So it actually is able to make your damage output exponentially larger by just having the virtue of Kaito on the team, because whatever curse energy he's able to give you, you can convert that into straight damage by using your skill 3. So that's kind of why Kaito is like literally one of the best character for Yuta, not to mention obviously when you actually increase the curse energy for Yoga and enemy, you're actually able to sustain that 4 stacks of buff on Yuta all the time when he actually goes into his ultimate attack and then his back-to-back skill 3 towards the second half of the battle. So that's kind of why Kaito is one of the best choice to pair up with Yuta. And then lastly, also another very good character is gonna be Toge, and Toge really helps with Yuta because of his skill 2. Now this actually helps in 2 ways. One is that it's able to increase the ultimate, and well, actually it helps in 3 ways now that I think about it. One is that it's able to increase the ultimate gauge for Yuta, and I kind of already mentioned one thing with Yuta is that you actually want him to use his ultimate attack as soon as possible, so that you can then start using his buff afterwards that is triggered by his ultimate attack. So it's actually quite crucial that you're able to use his ultimate attack quite early, and Toge is obviously able to do that. The second thing Toge's skill 2 is able to do is obviously that damage reduction, because yes, Yuta is able to heal the HP of his allies, he's not actually able to help himself. So this damage reduction is quite helpful on Yuta as well. And then thirdly, whenever Toge use an attack, it actually sacrifices his own HP, which actually makes it a lot easier for your Yuta to then actually trigger his passive. And remember, when you trigger your passive earlier, first of all, that means your permanent damage buff is going to be applied to you earlier, and secondly, your ultimate gauge is going to be applied to you as well, and therefore you're able to get your ult out a lot quicker, and therefore once again have that bit of extra boost to your damage output as early in the battle as possible. So that's kind of why Toge is actually a really good choice with Yuta whenever you actually play him, because it just helps Yuta in kind of 3 different ways like I mentioned. Now, in terms of recollections that you want to put on your teammate when you play Yuta, basically, obviously, a good choice is going to be this one. You're able to increase the ultimate gauge for your whole team. That's always going to be helpful for any DPS, especially for Yuta, because once again, like I said, you want to trigger your buff as early as possible, so you can do off your nukes early on in the battle rather than wait, 6 or 7 turns before you actually have them active. So that's kind of why this is a good choice. Other good choice would be, for example, this one. This one is a good choice because you're actually able to sacrifice your own HP, and once again, that can actually potentially help your Yuta to trigger your passive skill very early on. And once again, the earlier you trigger it means the earlier you're able to get your permanent buff, and also the earlier you're able to actually use your ultimate attack. So once again, it's a win-win for everyone. So this is why this is also a very good recollection. And also something else a lot of time I actually play on Toge in order to guarantee that I'm able to trigger his passive on turn 1 is actually to play a taunt recollection, because basically when you actually do it this way, not only Toge is gonna be sacrificing his own HP through his skill 2, he's also gonna get hit a lot, and therefore almost guaranteed that his HP will be below 60%, which is enough to trigger your passive as early as turn 1. And a lot of time, what it actually works out is that once Toge actually dies, because to be honest, Toge only need to be on this team for like 2 turns in order to give the maximum amount of curse energy, ultimate energy to Yuta, and after 2 turns, Toge's job is kind of done. So by playing a taunt recollection such as this, you are also able to help your team to rotate in a third buffer in order to really help to get Yuta's damage as high as possible, and that's normally going to be Nanami. And obviously, some of the general recollection you want to put outside of taunt or sacrificing HP, etc., will just be any kind of recollection which is able to give a bit of extra damage buff to Yuta. You do probably want to give a bit of priority to recollection which lasts for multiple turns. So for example, this one is going to be a good one because it lasts for 2 turns. So not only you have it for the turn of your ultimate attack, you also have it for your skill 3 afterwards. And also obviously another really good choice is going to be this one, which I actually use a lot, which basically just gives you a 10% permanent buff throughout the entire battle. And once again, this is going to be applied to all 3 or 4 back-to-back skill 3 Yuta's going to have on top of his ultimate attack, and that's kind of why you're going to get actually a lot of buff in total from this recollection in comparison to some of the other recollection which you can only trigger by using them, etc. So that's basically going to be another good choice if you actually want to put on your supporting character when you play Yuta.